So, Dr. Bernard Beitman,
Beitman.
um, Bateman,
Beitman.
yeah,
Beitman. Yeah.
Beitman. Okay, it comes with a bite.
Comes with a bite, and it's a BYTE sometimes too.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, thanks so much for sharing your time. So, just for some background, Dr. Bernard is the first psychiatrist since Carl Jung to systemize the study of coincidences. A graduate of Yale Medical School, he did his psychiatric residency at Stanford University. And we have his book here, Meaningful Coincidences. And this explores why and how coincidences and synchronicity occur, and serendipity. And we got another copy over there on the other side of the world. Yeah, how and why these common occurrences occur, and yeah, how to use them to inspire psychological, interpersonal, and spiritual growth. Dr. Bernard's also the founding director of the Coincidence Project, which encourages people to tell each other their coincidence stories. Yeah, really looking forward to diving into the anatomy of coincidences today, Bernie. Um, yeah, and I'd love to just start with a bit of like just personal history. Why did you start out as a psychiatrist, Bernie?
I wanted to help my mother. My mother was a difficult woman, and I recognized that pretty early. And I think that was one of the motivations. And she wanted me to be a doctor. And I was a Jewish boy who didn't like blood, so a psychiatrist was like multiply determined for me.
Fair enough. That was the avenue that you were going to be pushed towards, or you had a bit of influence.
Yep, yep. It's I like the mind. I mean, when I was in medical school, it was the question of cardiology or psychiatry, and then I realized the heart it's is a pump. It's pretty complicated, but it's a pump. And since then, I've learned more and more about mind heart, brain heart relationships. The two are much more entwined than I ever knew when I was in medical school. They didn't really teach us much about that. So I like the mind. I like to figure out how minds work. I like to know if I could, how the brain and mind interact with each other. It's the hard problem of philosophy, knowing how mind and brain interact with each other. It's a hard problem of psychiatry too. And I think in that latter part of my book, Meaningful Coincidences, I try to be able to show a way in which mind and brain interact with each other. And it's not my own idea either. I came up with it on my own, but other people have said something about the same thing, that we're different frequencies of the same kind of thing.
Hmm. And what do you mean by that, mind and brain? Like I think a lot of people would see like mind as up here and brain as up here. So, what do you mean by mind and brain and how they
Well, can you
interact?
differentiate with yourself between mind and brain?
When you say brain, that I get the feeling that it's a organ in my head.
Yes, it is.
And when you say mind, I get an idea that it's maybe something a little bit more less easy to put my hands on, um, but yeah, probably a little bit more something else.
A
What
little
about
bit
you?
more something else. Yeah, that's the idea. It's what is this little what is this little more something else thing? Consciousness is a kind of word that's being used for it. Uh, the problem that I was alluding to, the hard problem, is that you can see correlations between thoughts and brain function. For example, in the treatment of depression, psychotherapy changes the brain and pharmacotherapy changes the mind. So pills change the mind by mediating through the brain, while psychotherapy changes the brain by going through the mind. So there's a simple example of mind brain interaction. But the philosophers might talk about it is that let's say I decide to go swimming with some turtles in some island in Indonesia. Let's say I try to do that, and I touch one of the turtles, and that feeling of touching the turtle in the water can't be described in terms of brain function. It's something that's a quality of experience, of floating around that turtle. The feeling you have, it's called a qualia, or the qualitativeness of the experience, is not directly attributable to brain function. It's somehow correlated, probably, but it's not the same thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so it sounds like on one side of the coin you have yeah, brain functions where you can measure it, and then the other one is more senses and more of a subjective experience. Is that
Exactly, it's
right?
subjective, and making that distinction, how the subjective maps out on the brain is a big problem. A lot of psychiatrists believe that the brain creates the subjective experience. I don't happen to think that's the case.
You believe it's the other way around?
I believe there's an interaction between the two, uh, that a thought can originate outside the brain. Um, Telepathy, for example. Do you think telepathy happens?
Telepathy is when I can read someone's mind, or
Yeah,
maybe you could define
yeah,
that.
well, yeah. I mean, it's not a complicated
Yep.
idea. It's a simple, common example is you think of someone, and you haven't heard from them for a long time, and they contact you. It's it's
Hmm.
one of the most common experiences in the telepathic arena, but people don't pay attention to that. But somehow the other person's thoughts and your thoughts are not are connected with each other. I'll give you a more fun example than that. Um, One of the things that I've heard is marvelously wonderful at Bali is dance, conscious dance, or however, five rhythms is other names for it, and
Unbelievable.
it's that you just do what you want to do. You feel it, and the energy in the place really builds up, and you can go for it. And some really good energy goes on between people in Bali dances. It kind of happens here too, but it doesn't happen that with that intensity. How do I know? Because part of the reason that I wanted to be able to meet with you is that a friend of mine has just come back from Bali, having been there for a month, and she lives in Charlottesville. And this is to illustrate a different form of coincidence, just to give us a little background. I'll get to the telepathy in a minute. The, the, so this person I know goes to Bali, then somebody refers somebody to me to be on my podcast who has been in Bali, and that person who had been in Bali, oh, that's what a coconut. You got a coconut thing there,
Yeah, yeah, fresh from the
fresh from
tree.
the tree. Yeah, I saw some movies of those. That's so delicious. I can almost taste it. I mean, how can I almost taste it just kind of watching you do it? But that's another thing. So somebody recommends somebody to be on my podcast, and it turns out that she's at Yale now as a graduate student, had been in Bali, and she had been swimming with turtles. As my friend who was in Bali was swimming with turtles, so I introduced them to each other. They live in different places, and then what happens? She comes back from Bali, and Jordan contacts me from Bali, and I go, "What? I hardly knew where Bali was, and now with you having my third contact with somebody who's been through Bali, and you're living there. That's kind of coincidence. Three Balis is the sort of thing that I like to study. What do you think of that? Bali, 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 Bali. Besides Bali Belly, which she got too.
Yeah, come to Bali. Skip the Bali belly if you can. Um, yeah, I guess. So three coincidences. Yeah. Um, yeah. I mean, you have to visit sometime. It's a beautiful island. I've been to 40 plus different countries, and I always coming back to Bali. Yeah, it's a magical island. I was just walking into my space here before, and we have the girls doing some offerings around the building, and so there's a unique energy here
There's,
that I haven't
there's a unique
found
there's a
anywhere else.
unique energy there, and that's part of the reason I'm glad to talk with you. Is you're there, and she sent a lot of videos back and photographs, so I have a sense of Bali and some of the islands around Bali, and how beautiful some of the waterfalls are. But anyway, that's I got had my heart went out to Bali, so that's part of the fun of being able to talk with you. But we were talking about telepathy. So at dance here, I was dancing with another person that was her name is Misty, and while we're dancing, Misty is like says, "Oh, I hear the sound of a merry-go-round in that music, a carousel." So I could kind of hear it with her, and so we pretended like we were on horses on a merry-go-round. And then she says, "Let's get out of here." So we rode the horses off the merry-go-round off into the distance. Well, that she goes home and she gets a call from a friend of hers in California. California is 3 hours earlier, so this friend was sleeping while we were riding the merry-go-round and riding the horses. And the friend says to Misty, "I had a dream that you were on a merry-go-round."
Huh,
That's,
that's weird.
well, it's weird, and it happens more frequently than we think. A lot of these things are more regular. It's weird, and well, it was great to hear it, and I love the connection because I knew this woman. I danced with her, the California woman. I danced with her when she was in Charlottesville, Virginia, which is where I am. So I had a little bit of contact with her. It shows how connected we can be. And the Bali thing has made me connected to Bali. The three Balis, with you being the third. I mean, she gets back from Bali, you contact me. And these are the sorts of things that I take as hints about how reality works. So I wanted to be able to feel as well as talk with you, feel your experience of Bali, and be with you, and in a way be in Bali uh, by being connected with you.
Yeah, likewise. So no, it's such an honor to speak with you, Bernie. So yeah, I've got a lot of questions that I'd love to dive into.
Please do.
And yeah, and I'm really curious as you mentioned telepathy. I'm really curious around like how we can develop those kind of skills in ourselves. And but I just wanted to start off by what's for
Hold
your
on. Excuse me. Hold on to that because that's a very, 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 very important question. How do we how do we manage these things? They kind of happen. They seem spontaneously. How can we use them? You are a very practical guy. You are Mr. Entrepreneur. You look for business opportunities, and that means you look for practical things. And the grant that I am working on is to try to create the deliverables that can come out of looking for patterns and coincidences. So it'd be great to keep in contact with you afterwards as we develop this to try to see the practicality of some of this that seems crazy, seems weird, that is really part of this reality that we don't acknowledge.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I think there's a lot that we don't know. Just as humans, we can be ignorant, and we can think that we know it all. But uh, I think you would agree that we don't know shit, and we should try and know that shit. But firstly, I wanted to start with coincidences. So the name of your book, Coincidences. So what's the difference between a coincidence and a synchronicity? Because those two words get thrown around a bit. What's your define those two if you
I
could?
do that in the book, as you mentioned, the anatomy of a coincidence is what what's a coincidence, what's a meaningful coincidence, and that's the key part of this. Meaningful coincidence and synchronicity are very much the same thing, at least to Carl Jung, who invented the term synchronicity. But the word coincidence is a neutral term. It doesn't say whether it's useful or not. You have to put an adjective in front of it, like meaningful, so that it's a meaningful coincidence. It means it has some relevance, or amazing coincidence, or surprising coincidence. It means that you want to pay attention to them. A coincidence is the coming together of two apparently separate things, like the 3 times getting Bali in a short period of time. For me, those were like coincidences. Now, they were meaningful to me because I knew two of the people, now I know you. So it became something to investigate. It also would be called a synchronicity by many people because it's a meaningful coincidence. The reason I use the word coincidence is synchronicity tends to have a woo-woo kind of feeling around it. And I want to get the meaningful coincidence thing out to the general public because they are happening all the time. And if there's any place that they're happening a lot, it's on Bali. It's the veil is thin on Bali. So you can think stuff and it can happen more readily on Bali unless you get caught up in rigid routines. And you can do that in Bali too. You can just have a regular day and this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm doing. If you have a high structure, even on Bali, it's going to reduce the possibility. But when people go out into a place like Bali, stuff happens. And it's just amazing. This woman at Yale, when she was in Bali, wanted to be on a podcast, and some guy stops her on the road and says, "Would you be on my podcast?" And she didn't know the guy. It's like they had a conversation, but stuff like that happens more easily when you're loose. When you're not loose, even in Bali, they might be less common, but I still think there probably are.
Hmm. Yeah, awesome. Thank you. And when did you start becoming aware of coincidences in your own life? Was it at when you were studying at Yale or Stanford or before that? When did coincidences start? When did you start documenting them, or when did you start becoming aware of them?
When I was about 8 or 9, my dog got lost, and I got lost, and we found each other. And that was an amazing experience for me because I loved that puppy. I still do. Just imagine him being around now, especially when we go in the woods, because he and I used to walk in the woods. But that experience of getting lost and he got lost and we found each other was the first one. And there's a feeling that happens with meaningful coincidences. Jung called it numinous, a kind of a mystical experience. For me, it was just deep joy, which is numinous, that I saw him, my dog, coming toward me, and he saw me coming toward him, and I was happier to see him than he was to see me. He kind of said, "Where have you been? I've been looking for you." So we went home. So that numinous feeling I had with him then got repeated many times afterwards. In 6th grade, playing football and baseball in high school, playing rugby at Yale and in San Francisco, being a hippie, a part-time hippie in San Francisco in the late 60s. A lot of synchronicities happening there. So my life is a life of many synchronicities and serendipities. So I finally got to it to want to really study it when the second most dramatic coincidence happened to me. I was standing by a sink in 1973 in San Francisco, 11 p.m. San Francisco time, and I couldn't stop choking. It seems like something was caught in my throat, and I couldn't stop choking. And finally, I did. I hadn't eaten anything. Finally, I did. Um, the next day, my brother called and said that in Wilmington, Delaware, which is 3,000 miles away from San Francisco, our father had died at 2 a.m. Wilmington, Delaware time, which was 11 p.m. San Francisco time. So around the same time I was choking, my father was dying, and he was dying choking on his own blood. So I was choking while he was choking. And I had to say, this is no coincidence. The timing is too perfect. I had to understand coincidences because of my dog and because of my father. And those are the two major influences on how I got to be talking with you.
Mm. Wow. Two very fascinating
Thank you.
stories on different ends of the spectrum.
Yes.
Yeah, if you look at those two experiences and the maps that you've created since then of how yeah, what do they tell you, or your study of your coincidences, um, how are coincidences formed, and what is the patterns of coincidences?
Well, these two examples illustrate two different patterns. Um, with my dog, it was what I call human internal GPS. That, like with our cars, we have ways of getting to where we need to be. The difference is we don't do it consciously when we're doing it intuitively, as I did with my dog, and my dog did it with me. That we have this ability to get where we need to be, right place, right time, without knowing just how it happened. But it happens, and it happens pretty frequently. That's one that's one pattern, and it's worth emphasizing, Jordan, that if some weird thing happens to me or weird things happens to you, it's weird and wonderful for you, but it's probably has happened to somebody else, is happening to somebody else, or will happen to somebody else. We are all human, experiencing human experiences, and coincidences like right place, right time are common. Except it's so wonderful to find my dog that I don't care if they're common or not, we found each other. With my father, that was something I had to ask about. I created the Weird Coincidence Survey. So if anybody wants to, that's watching us, listening to us, wants to get some idea of how sensitive they are to coincidences, they can take the Weird Coincidence Survey, which is on my website and on the coincidenceproject.net website. And I think you've got some of those URLs to be able to get there, but put my name in the search engine, you're bound to come up with my website. And I developed that scale to ask the question, among other things, is, do you ever feel the pain or distress of a loved one at a distance? And the answer on 4 point answers of never to always was occasionally. This is not an uncommon experience to feel the distress of a loved one at a distance. I wish we'd be more aware of feeling the fun a loved one's having at a distance. And we should be, and maybe we do, but that doesn't get reported as often as, like my father choking and my brother telling me, and I knew I was choking. So those are two
Mm.
types. And the feeling the pain of a loved one or distress of a loved one is used to be known as telepathy. Tele at a distance, pathy, feeling. And then it became thought transference. So I invented a new term called simulpathity for feeling the pain of a loved one at a distance. So those are two patterns, Jordan.
Okay, amazing. And can we program ourselves to see more, feel more, have more coincidences in our
Ye-
lives? And is there any connection between the RAS, the reticular activating system, and coincidences?
Why'd you ask that one?
Why did I ask the
About the
RAS one?
RAS? Yeah, why'd you ask that one?
Because it's been in my, similar to you, it's been in my field a little bit in the last few weeks. And I've been I've been training my RAS to look for things that I desire, look for things that are in my future. So that's why I yeah, ask that one.
Well, you've got it. From what I understand, it's a filter, uh, and that it filters lots of our experiences. And what you're doing is training your reticular activating system to pick out certain patterns, ones that you want to run across. And that seems to be a neurobiological correlate of increasing coincidences. The research isn't there that I know of, but it's a hypothesis that you have just come across that I've heard another person describe very much the same way.
Yeah, well, the way I see it is you can use it to just become more, so it's not like such a far out thing, right? That whatever that is, whether that's bringing in more leads for your business or for your wherever you when I first started coming to Bali, um, I didn't. I was like a young entrepreneur with not too much. I just wanted to make a few $100 a week and live in the hammock and surf, right? But uh, I was able, Bali's it's got a quite low quality, a low cost of living. So you can stay in super nice places, and you can spend time in fancy resorts and surround yourself with sort of luxury at a pretty low cost. So yeah, kind of putting yourself in those environments and attract attracting more of those beautiful environments, especially. Yeah, I like to play the game of window shopping, going to these places that have these certain vibes. But yeah, I'm curious from your perspective, can we program ourselves to see more coincidences from a yeah, I'm not a psychiatrist that studied at Yale or Stanford, so I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Um, yes, we can, and I'm continuing to develop ways to help train people to be alert to them. But the first most important thing you have been able to do, which is realize that meaningful coincidences happen. That is, coincidences between what you're thinking and what happens out there. That's the fundamental form. Mind and object. There are other mind. Telepathy is mind. Object is Bali, where anybody could see that. The more common one is I think of something and I want it to happen, and I'm having to get calm now about having donors for the coincidence project. I mean, it's hard to get money from people, but you got to be open to the possibility, and that makes it happen. And when I started the coincidence project, $1,000 appeared on a check in my mailbox, and I called a woman, and she gave us another 25,000, and that was just out of nowhere, and we needed it right then. I mean, it was really a wonderful timing for that. So it was open, things were in flux. Now I'm having to say what we have is really a good thing, and we need to be able to have some cash to expand our capacity to get the message about meaningful coincidences out there. So that's one of the things that I'm doing. In the meanwhile, I've had smaller things where I've needed things. I needed to get some cases for synchronicity in medical practice for a presentation to some other doctors. And I only had psychology ones. An otolaryngologist writes me out of the blue, emails me, and gives me like 5 of them. And I needed those. And there they were. I don't know why he did that. And I had 2 other instances like that. So the fun thing is, Jordan, is that when they come from beyond your social sphere, when you're sitting here saying, hey, I want to get some more cases from a non-psychiatrist physician, and poof, they show up. And from nobody. I mean, he won't even, I try to dialogue with him, He wouldn't, or he didn't, but he gave me what I needed. And that, I have theories about how that works. It's called, I use the psychosphere for that. It's like doing a radio thing where you try to tune into a frequency of a radio station. There's other frequencies out there, but it's just using radios because we still can tune them to some degree. It's old-fashioned radio, but we know what it is to tune to a radio station. The frequency's out there, and I'm going to tune to try to get to that frequency. We do that. We can do that in the psychosphere, and you have to do that with it's a discipline. You have to be able to put it out there and then let it go and not hold on to it. Letting go is really important.
Yeah, amazing. So a lot of things to dive into there. So when you're saying tuning your frequency, what do you mean by that? Do you mean by having a conversation? Do you have like I know Jim Carrey is famous for going on top of the mountain and saying, "I made $1 million in my movie," or I'm the best actor, whatever, at the top of a mountain in somewhere in Hollywood. So are you talking about like having conversations with the field, or what do you, how would you kind of, again, how do we make this practical, and how do we bring more of what we want?
We have to be ethical about it, I'm pretty sure. One of my favorite things in the past was giving people what they want, and sometimes when they get what they want, it ain't what you need, as the Rolling Stones have told us many times. Play that one over and over again. What we want is not necessarily the best thing for us, and we have to be clear about that. What we need is something else, and need is more soul-based, more like what is good for not just you but other people. Want may be just good for you. So that's a key part of trying to be able to do that. And your question about frequency is wonderful. And I'm going to ask you, I'll still try to answer the question, but you've got a good imagination. What do you imagine I'm suggesting is happening, Jim Carrey-wise or otherwise, when you come up with something you want to be able to have happen? What do you think? What's that interchange? How do you imagine that?
Well, I think that it's more, for me, I think it's more useful to be thankful that it's already happened, and celebrating that it already has happened. What do I think that is happening? I read your book, so I have a few pointers, but I think that Nikola Tesla says if you want to understand the laws of the universe, think in frequencies, or so I think just coming from the place that it's already happened, then you can have more of that. I don't really know the mechanics of it, how different patterns interact with each other, and I wouldn't be very well versed on explaining the quantum side of it.
I'm not
yet.
doing quantum. I'm really not. One thing you just said, which I think is very, very important, is you act as if it's already happened. And you're
Yep.
grateful for it having already happened. We have to recognize, at least I would like to suggest we recognize, that we are different individuals, and we have different methods by which to help create our own environments and our own relationships. And we have different talents. Not that everybody has a unique talent. We share talents, but your ability to make things happen and mine may not operate on the same wavelength, let's say. I may not operate the same way. And I want to be careful about generalizing from my way of doing things, because I think that's wrong. We got to see how Jordan does it, or how our viewers and listeners might do it. And what you do is start with it's already happened. It's not something that I don't go that way necessarily. I don't usually. I mean, that's not my way of doing things. And there are probably many ways of imagining and having it happen, and being grateful for it, or doing something else, letting it go. There's all kinds of parts to this that I think people will put together in their own ways. But the fundamental thing that I hope you and I are getting across to people is that meaningful coincidences don't happen unless you pay attention to the possibility of their happening. That's fundamental. And I say that with a great deal of emphasis, because if you don't know that they're going to happen, you're less likely to see them. So believe that they're useful and be on the lookout for their happening. And just how they happen is still open to a lot of speculation. And you have an idea about how you did it. I have my ideas about how it might happen. And what I was suggesting is, imagine a thought form as a packet of frequency, a frequency packet. It's kind of condensed. And I need to have some money for the coincidence project. That's the thing. And I have to, like, not be nervous about it. I have to, like, put it there, and I put it out there as a thing with its own frequency, and it's attached to me. And somehow, maybe you've heard of the phrase from Rumi, what you're seeking is also seeking you. That there could be someone else out there, as there has been already, who would like to be able to participate financially in the coincidence project. So whatever this frequency is, it matches, it resonates with that frequency of this other person, and they come together, and that person somehow finds a way to contact me. Now that's the way it seems to work, has worked for me sometimes. But there's different ways it happens, but the primary thing is you got to believe that they're happening. I mean, Jordan, part of the reason I do all this talking about it on podcasts is to let people know this is a common human experience, meaningful coincidences. And they're happening around you on a regular basis. Some are some are problematic, some are less, they're just funny, and some of them are fun, some of them are beautiful, and some of them are really helpful.
Mm. Yeah, amazing. Yeah, I love what you're doing with the coincidence
Thank
project.
you. Thank you.
And I hope that I trust that this will raise some more awareness around that. And I'll definitely, I had some questions about that a little bit later. But yes, I know that you mentioned letting go. So
Letting go.
yeah, what is that? Uh, that might not be one of my stronger ones, letting it go. But yeah, what is that? Um, does that mean like just giving up? Be like, oh fuck it, it wasn't meant to. This is not on my path. That's for someone else. What is the letting
Well,
go?
well, the friend of mine that's just come back from Bali is giving a class on letting go in a couple of days, and I'm going. So she's got some ideas about it that are different from mine. Her ideas are let go of some of the rigid patterns of your life. Look at the patterns you're running, and being able to see which ones are worth abandoning, and letting them go from you, and being open to new possibilities. And I'll hear more about that from her. But my favorite version of this, and what you just said, was like, get out of here, I'm not interested. I mean, that it'll never happen. Sometimes that's not bad either. It's a kind of strong form of letting go. It's like, but sometimes you do have to let go, and that in one place that I see this a lot is in relationships. In relationships, particularly romantic relationships, uh, where one of the persons, or maybe both of them, begin to develop movies in their minds, mind movies about how this thing is going to develop. You know, there's a lot of like ownership things in music. I own you, you belong to me kind of thing. It's still around. It was in the 50s and 40s, and it's still here. And it can't, this is not viable for a lot of people now. You can't own people the way we thought we could own people. We need to be able to be our own individuals. So one of the ways of important ways of letting go that I hope people pay attention to is recognize you have movies in your mind where you're the hero, you're the main character, you're the protagonist, you're the script writer, you're the director, and you are getting other people to try to play roles in your movie. They are also running their movies too, and to get them movies to connect with each other sometimes can be called conflict, where my movie and your movies don't go together. I'm just now talking about the early stage romantic thing, but it applies other places where one of them starts saying, well, love and marriage, we got to get married, we got to have kids or something. Or you are not going to dance with other guys, or some version of what the future is going to be with us. And we can't help it almost to do these mind movies or expectation videos. So what I'm suggesting is in this as an example here is to have an expectation or a mind movie of how it's going to work out and then let it go, because it might not work out that way, and it might, but let it go and see what else develops, see how it develops organically here without my trying to make the other person fit the role that I have for that person in my movie.
Hmm. So you would set a general frame of how your mind of how you want to write your romance or write the next chapter in your life, and you wouldn't select specific characters for it. You more just attune to the complete image rather than the individual. You're going to be this character, and you're going to be this character.
Well, you can do that. I mean, it's fun to do that. It's just after you do that, let go of them. I mean, you can do as much detail as you want. I don't like to do a lot of detail. Some people do. When they're doing their reticular activating system thing that you were talking about, there are some people who train their reticular activating system in very great detail about what they want the outcome to be. I tend to have a more general view of how I'd like it to be, and even that I have to let go of. So we vary in that way.
Okay. Yeah, awesome. When you've probably heard this before, I know I've said it a few times. Usually with emotional charge. There are no coincidences, Bernie. What does that statement mean to you? There's no such thing as a coincidence. I know that there's some tribe or there's some language where coincidence isn't part of the vocabulary. Or yes, I might
No, I
be a
think
little
you're
bit
right.
off the
It's
mark there.
Aborigines in Australia, among others. It's just a part of life. It's just the things that I would call coincidences are part of life for many people. There's a sense of the world being enchanted in the among for human beings where everything was mysterious and magical, and then we got into like being rational. And what I'm trying to do is help re-enchant the world and with the amazement of the amazing things that are happening in this world, but do it in a with some rationality involved with it. So that when you ask there are no coincidences, it's a funny phrase, um, and that's funny too. Like everything happens for a reason. Those are two favorite things people like to say. The simple answer I have, a response I have to there are no coincidences. If you know the cause or the explanation for a coincidence, then it's not a coincidence anymore. The definition of coincidence is two events coming together in an improbable, surprising way with no apparent causal explanation. With no apparent causal explanation. So if you've got a causal explanation that you're satisfied with, it's not a coincidence. And the people who know the explanation for a coincidence are in two groups. One is the statisticians. They know it's all random. So there are no coincidences for statisticians. And those people who know God is doing them. So if God is causing all the coincidences, there are no coincidences because this is God doing it. I can say God. So those are two explanations, random and God, but they can't both be right. Or can they? Well, I think they can both be right, but they're not right absolutely. So the trouble with there are no coincidences is people want to have black and white, yes or no. Caused by this, caused by that. No. With coincidences, there's mystery. I'll call mystery God or God mystery. There is probability. All coincidences have a probability, which is connected to randomness. But there's Jordan doing something, like noticing him to start with, or like having imagining an outcome that Jordan would like to have. And then Jordan sees it. And so it's not just that Jordan sees it, but he acts on the connection between what he's thought and what he sees. And that makes the coincidence. You have to act. So the agency of the individual is a key part of an explanation for meaningful coincidences.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, so you have the two sides. You have the ones that say it's God, and you have the other ones that say it's statistics. I like if you know Y Combinator, which is a Silicon Valley startup. It was like the original Silicon Valley startup amplifier, or like companies go in there and they go much faster. The founder of that, Paul Graham, so he says that it's better to start a startup in somewhere like Silicon Valley, San Francisco, because you're going to be around people that are going to have more resources. You're going to be around people that have, that if you've got a tech company, you're going to be around more tech people. So yeah, there's obviously ways that you can increase your chances of coincidences. For me, starting this co-working space here in Bali has lots of random coincidences from
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
So
I would expect that, especially in Bali. What town are you in?
I'm in the Canggu, so the co-working is in Canggu. Yeah.
So I'm glad you say that because they have to happen. They're part of the fabric of experience. And so you had a lot of like random coming together of things when you needed them so you could make this co-working space happen. It's how it works usually. Do you want to tell us an example of that?
Yes. So, we opened the doors to this place and started off with, some friends and friends of friends that came here. And then we had other people coming and their friends. So, like you said, out of my direct sphere. And then, yeah, I love just walking in here and people having interesting conversations. If I can think of an example. I don't know. I'm not feeling like there's anything
Okay,
that's was
Stan,
too.
yeah, when you're on my podcast, I'm going to ask you some of these things. So I'm going to need to hear it from you because you're going to be doing more talking than I am. on that podcast. And I know that there's weird stuff happening on Bali. It's just because I've been there through this friend of mine, and felt even across the world I could communicate with her from here to Bali. That in Bali it's easy to get into the mind because the veil is thin, and I know that happened there. But what you've done and what you are really keen about and understand well is that if you get a bunch of active people together who are thinking and are willing to communicate with each other, they're going to create, and I'll say this, a group mind. That you have a group mind in that beehive that is your co-working space, and people are coming up with ideas simultaneously. Sometimes one over here and one over there is thinking of something, and they happen to be able to tell each other that they're thinking along the same lines. And that's because you have a group consciousness that increases the likelihood of telepathic communications and finding stuff from around Bali by penetrating out into the mind around Bali and pulling those ideas in, because they're all looking for ideas to try to make something to have happen. There's something called simultaneous independent discoveries or inventions. Very common that two people, three or four people find the same thing around the same time without having contact with each other. When you get them together the way you are, there's going to be a lot of fervent and foment, especially since you are very interested in getting people to interact in this web that you've created. It's kind of like an internet of the mind that you create in that co-working space where people are sharing information without actually knowing that they're doing it until they start telling each other about it.
Hmm. Yeah, amazing. I think I will use that little clip as a promo for the for the co-working space. But yeah, we have a weekly mastermind here, so where we'll just go up into the room and chat, and we have a little structure for it. But yeah, I think the way that you just phrased it will be
Well,
might get a few more people to come along.
I'm going to pretend that I'm going to be in the next meeting with you, and I can kind of go along with you. And just imagine me standing or sitting on your shoulder as you do that meeting, and I ask you to imagine a mind movie of all the people's minds in that group, and even some who aren't there, much more coalesced than we think of our minds being. That we're not islands unto ourselves, and that when you come to a place like yours, and when you, as the leader of the place, starts imagining the mind of the people gathered together as one mind, then you will start encouraging them to recognize meaningful coincidences between what each of them are doing. And it takes a little while. You got to be relaxed, you got to be trusting, you got to be open, you got to let ideas come into you, and then you start talking about them. And as I was in a meeting today on Zoom, and I was just getting a little frustrated because I wanted to be able to recognize the group mind that we were all a part of. And toward the end, there were coincidences that connected people emotionally with each other, that were similar in their recent experiences. And I know that happens if you pay attention to them. And man, you are in a perfect place to do this kind of stuff, with Bali being the surrounding area. It's just beautiful possibilities for you.
Mm. Amazing, Bernie. So next, it's 2:30 p.m. I'll send you a reminder. And I'll set up a chair for you on the
Yeah, put
mastermind.
my book in the
Would
chair. That'll help.
I will,
That'll help.
I will.
And I'll be sleeping while that's going on. But 23 is one of my favorite numbers, so that's a nice place to start.
Awesome. Yeah, I just want to respect your time because I know it's late over there. I've got a couple more questions. So shifting gears a bit, in the digital age with, algorithms often creating seemingly serendipitous moments, I know that we exchanged some. Oh yeah, I connected with you, and then the algorithm fed me. Before that, I knew that you connected with some people in Bali. I didn't know you connected with anyone in Bali, but the algorithm fed me one of your videos of someone in
Oh,
Bali.
really?
So
Wow.
yeah, I sent you a screenshot, or maybe it was to your assistant, but I told you, I said in the email, we were talking about coincidences, serendipity. I didn't know that you were speaking with anyone in Bali, and then I booked a meeting with you, or this conversation, a chat, and then the algorithm fed me one of your videos with the girl in Bali. So yeah. So my question is,
Yeah.
um, how do we yeah, how do we distinguish between genuine cosmic coincidences and computer generated ones? Is there a difference?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the ones that try to sell you something are algorithmic. And making that distinction is becoming more and more important to do. That what I'm trying to be able to help people do is stay uh, to remain not just to remain analogical, stay with analog, not digital. Telepathy and synchronicity are analog. They're not digital. Even though you might think we're in a matrix kind of simulation, even though you might think that, and it could be, but it's still the human experience is analog, and digital is trying to make us zeros and ones, and I want to make us continuous, and synchronicity helps maintain it. There's going to be a way to put the digital and the analogical together in a positive way. I've seen hints of that at least a couple of years ago. I think that can happen, but synchronicity is analogical, and somehow knowing that it's not algorithmic is a key question to wonder about, especially when we get some coincidences that happen in virtual reality, which they can happen, but they that don't necessarily happen because somebody's programmed. But there are programs in this reality, the analogical reality, that are underlying some of what we're doing. That, so that it's fun to be able to get mixed up in this way. But if you have a deep emotional response to something, a coincidence, that's a good hint that it's not a setup by some digital something or other.
Hmm.
And for
Okay.
you to get that thing that's the picture of me is very much like people turning on the radio. Like just today, I was listening to a old rock and roll station, and I could finally take you get no satisfaction with the Stones. I could like, okay, I'll listen to this one, and it's really funny. A man comes on the TV. He can't be much of a man because he doesn't smoke the same cigarette as me. I mean, there's some funny things that they let in there, which I didn't hadn't quite heard before. So then I go do what I had to do, and I come back to the car, and then somebody in another station says, "Yeah, the Stones are releasing their first new album since 2005." So I just listen to the Stones, and then I hear somebody telling me about the Stones. Those are not programmed in digital ways. That those somehow they happen with digitals, but they're not digital. And how they happen is a really fun question to ask. And I will ask those questions. But first, the first thing I'm doing, which isn't saleable right now, but I'm going to try to make it a product that's sellable, is just what are these things? What are we dealing with here? What are coincidences? What are the patterns of coincidences?
Yeah, well, it gets me thinking. Well, you said before that a coincidence is something with an emotion, something that happens, seemingly uncorrelated, um, with that has a sparks some sort of emotional thing,
Yeah,
emotional
yeah.
reaction. So, is it that just we're just ignorant basically of the algorithms that are operating in the universe, in our system, that gives us that emotional. Oh wow, that was
Now
surprising.
you have a choice here because I can't tell you what it really is, uh, and what you're implying is that we're living in a simulation of some kind, where there are some algorithms that are running us. Sometimes it's fun to think about some teenager in a different dimension having us be in a video game. And they're running out, we're their avatars. The difference is that in this video game, as far as I can tell, for this teenager who's running, uh, her name is Mata Bubadita in this other place. She's the difference in her game is that these humans, these avatars that she's playing with, have the sense of free will. There's something within each one of them that allows them to make decisions that she is not necessarily programming in a very specific way, but maybe in a general way. But it's the fun of it is to see if they go here or go there, and then see what happens when they go there instead of going over there. And then can they? And I think this is the game. Can humanity, ladies and gentlemen, can humanity find a way to find compassion for each other and for the earth before they destroy themselves? Now that's the video game.
That's the master script of the game,
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah.
So in your perspective, we're on a race for compassion.
And really, I say compassion because I'm supposed to, because that's supposed to be a good thing. But I'm really here to have some fun. I think the idea of being here on Earth is a place that we can have a lot of fun. And one of the most fun things to do is dance. And of course, some people like to surf, as you know. And some people, that's a form of dance, I think. Dancing with the waves. There's all kinds of ways to be able to dance and to be able to love. I mean, there's all kinds of ways to love, and love is fun. It's painful if you don't do it right, and we can learn how to do it. But compassion is kind of, it's a good thing. We should be compassionate for each other, should feel for each other. I mean, there's a kind of like super ego kind of thing about compassion. You got to be. I think it's an important thing, but I'd like, I really like to have more fun and more love and more fun is what and learning. I mean, I'm very interested in finding out what's going on around here. What this teenager's name is, for example.
Yeah. Have fun, don't hurt anyone. Yeah, it's
Very
really
important.
good luck, luck good luck doing that with love.
You're
So,
getting it, and I wouldn't be surprised if you share some of that with me. Wouldn't be surprised.
I got two last questions. Can you tell me about the Coincidence Project? Why did you create it?
As you can tell, I'm pretty not compassionate only, but passionate about meaningful coincidences. Why? Well, they're a lot of fun for me. I like patterns, but I'm a doctor. I think they can be helpful. I'm curious, and coincidences help us understand how reality works. That's how we can work our way back to that teenager or whatever else is running this thing or has to do with how this thing works. I'm interested in learning the mind of God is one way to say it, or the teenager, or the programmer for the teenager. But I don't know. There's a big mystery here. All I know is there's a big mystery. And I like to be able to figure out parts of that mystery. And the Coincidence Project, getting people to talk about it and be able to create a mind that is interested in them and get people out in the world to pay attention to them. That's why I'm interested in this. And I think, and Jordan, this is where I am right now, is to try to show you, among other people, the practical usefulness of meaningful coincidences in helping humanity stop its slow drive for self-suicide.
Okay, amazing. Such a great cause, Bernie. Imagine a world where everyone is experiencing meaningful coincidences every hour. What effect does that have on society?
Well, that's my utopia, of course, you're getting to. And the what will happen is that people will find that emotional charge that you get by yourself is shared by someone else who's also getting an emotional charge from the same thing. A lot of coincidences involve two people. So the two people come together and they each share a feeling together that helps bond them. So synchronicity helps connect people emotionally. So what we would see is people are much more connected. They will be more aware of the ways in which they are connected with each other. And in doing that, I foresee that we find people through synchronicity who have purposes in life that are there to help each other, help humanity, help the earth, help animals, help the planet survive and be a great place to hang around in and have a good time, and each of them have a purpose that can fit together with other purposes, and that synchronicity can help bring them together, help them find things together, so that people are organized in a way that heart and mind are geared together towards a future that's shared and wonderful and fun and loving and however else we want to say it for everybody who wants to participate.
Beautiful, Bernie. That's amazing. It's definitely something that I could get behind. So, yeah, I love what you're creating. Love what you have created. Meaningful coincidences, full of like really interesting stories and some science stuff as well. So, yeah, it's a fun read. I actually was I picked it up. I picked it up. Give me a coincidence that I can look at for today, like similar to how someone might use the tarot cards or something, and then just reading a page. So, yeah, some more magic. Where it's definitely a magical book. So yeah, thank you so much for your time, Bernie. It was a real fun conversation, pleasure, and yeah, looking forward to keeping the conversations going.
Thanks very much, Jordan. And you just reminded me to think of what I'm doing as a magical mystery tour.
I love it. Thanks so much, Bernie.
You're welcome, Jordan. A pleasure talking with you. Thank you.
Cool. Stop the recording. Yeah, looking forward.